Hello, and welcome to episode 3.2. I am James. In this episode, we will continue our discussion about the categories of sounds and examples of those categories. Remember that there are two types of brackets: square brackets and slanted brackets. These are used for two types of IPA transcription. The type which uses slanted brackets is called broad transcription. We use this type to represent the abstract or the theoretically perfect head of a category of a sound. In other words, broad transcription represents our concept of the sound in our minds. The linguistic name for this is the underlying representation of the sound. This means that broad transcription is never used to transcribe real speech. So if you see a transcription of a sound in slanted brackets, this sound has not actually been heard. Instead, it is just a theoretical example of the head of a category of a sound. Returning to the glottal plosive example above, the glottal plosive can never be the head of a category because it is only one of the possible ways to say t. Thus, it is never written with slanted brackets. On the other hand, we use the other type of transcription, narrow transcription, to represent the sounds that we actually pronounce in the real world. As a result, this type of transcription uses as much detail as possible to represent exactly how we pronounce a sound. The linguistic name for this is the surface representation of the sound. In contrast to broad transcription, if a sound is transcribed with square brackets, then it was indeed real speech that has been heard. In conclusion, when transcribing real speech, we always use square brackets. Let's look at an example to illustrate the difference between the two types of transcription. I saw a cat today. Broad transcription, our theoretical concept of how the sentence should sound in a perfect form, or the underlying representation of the sound, looks like this. I saw a cat today. You can see that every sound is in its theoretically perfect form. In contrast, a narrow transcription, what someone may have actually said, might look like this. I saw a cat today. This transcription contains sounds that reflect the efficiency of speech in real-life communication. R was spoken between two vowels to aid fluency. Two vowels have been reduced to a schwa. The glottal plosive was spoken instead of t, and a stress marker has been included. The latter is an example of a diacritic, which is additional information regarding the way that a sound was spoken. Diacritics are never used in broad transcription because they only exist during speech. So far, we have learned that there are two levels to represent sounds. Broad transcription represents the abstract, theoretical concept of the sound that only exists in our mind. And narrow transcription represents the concrete, physical production of that sound. But why do we need these two levels? The reason is related to the fact that categorization is a very fundamental aspect of human cognition. In order to understand the world and create order from chaos, humans put many aspects of reality into groups. And in order to decide what items to put in each group, we find some kind of similarity between the group members. As babies, we get a huge amount of input of sounds. And as I said in Unit 2 of this MOOC, we process and produce sounds before we understand what they mean. all of the sounds that a baby is exposed to must seem very different to the baby, because different people often say the same word in slightly different ways. This is because people have different accents, because people speak at different speeds, because people's articulators are slightly different shapes. In fact, even the same person will sometimes say the same thing in different ways for various reasons. For example, he or she has a cold. He or she is drunk. He or she is in a hurry. Because of all this conflicting input, a baby has to learn which of these sounds are different categories of sounds, or examples of, in other words, different ways to say one category of a sound. Let's look at an example for a baby getting mostly British English input. He or she will soon learn that the sound t is mostly said as t, due to hearing it in different positions in a word. T could be at the beginning, for example, table, in the middle, for example, bottle, or at the end, for example, wet, of a word. Therefore, this sound, which the child has actually heard in the real world, will be used to represent the abstract category t in the baby's mind. So, t is what the baby thinks of when thinking of this sound. However, in real-life speech, t can of course be spoken in different ways. It could be t, which is what the baby probably hears the most. Also, it could be the glottal plosive, if it is in the middle or at the end of a word, and the adult is speaking quickly. This is why two levels of sound are needed. Sometimes we want to write the abstract category of a sound, and sometimes we want to write what someone actually said. These two levels of sound are represented in the image on the screen. Before we finish, please answer some questions.